Orson Welles, War of the Worlds.
Never before had a radio broadcast provoked such chaos or such outrage.
It would become, in the end, the most famous radio broadcast in history.
I think suit should be filed against him and the Columbia Broadcasting System for their wrongdoing, causing distress and suffering all over the country.
Why destroy all faith and confidence we have in the greatest means of getting information about the world? Radio.
I just think it means people are stupid.
Upwards of 1 million people convinced, if only briefly, that the United States was being laid waste by alien invaders.
And a nation left to wonder how they possibly could have been so gullible.
Ladies and gentlemen, we interrupt this program to bring you a special bulletin from the Intercontinental Radio News. It is reported that at 20 minutes before 8 Central Time, Professor Pearson of the Observatory at Princeton reports observing several explosions of incandescent gas occurring at regular intervals on the planet Mars. If recent history has taught us anything, it's that we should believe everything we read on the internet.
Or that the internet is a wide web full of misinformation, conspiracy theories, and flat-out lies.
However, misinformation always requires two components, the liar and the willing audience.
So now we must ask ourselves, why are we more likely to believe the lie?
The War of the Worlds.
By Orson Welles.
It was October 31st, Halloween. I had just sat down and started doing some sewing. Naturally, I reached out and turned on the radio.
Now nearer home comes a special bulletin from Trenton, New Jersey.
All of a sudden, a startling announcement.
It is reported that at 8:50 p.m., a huge flaming object, believed to be a meteorite, has fallen onto a farm in the neighborhood of Grover Mills, New Jersey. We take you live to the scene.
This is Carl Phillips again at the Wilmouth Farm, Grover's Mill, New Jersey. The thing directly in front of me, half buried in a vast pit, must have struck with terrific force. What I can see of the object itself doesn't look much like a meteor, at least not like the meteors I've seen. Here's Mr. Wilmouth, owner of the farm here. Mr. Wilmouth, will you please tell our radio audience what you recall of this rather unusual visitor that landed in your backyard?
Well, I was listening to the radio. Yes, sir. And when I was listening to the radio, I was kind of half drowsing. That professor fellow was talking about Mars or something, so I was kind of half dozing and half...
Yes, Mr. Wilmouth, and then what happened?
Well, I was kind of listening to the radio, kind of halfways.
Yes, and then you saw something.
Not first off. I heard something.
And what did you hear?
It was a hissing sound, like this.
Thank you, Mr. Wilmouth. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, do you hear it? It's a peculiar humming sound that seems to be coming from inside the object. Just a minute. Something's happening. Ladies and gentlemen, this is terrific. There seems to be a shadow wriggling out of the object like a gray snake. There, I can see it. It's large as a bear, and it glistens like wet leather. But that face, ladies and gentlemen, it's indescribable. I can hardly force myself to keep looking at it.
Ladies and gentlemen, due to circumstances beyond our control, we are unable to continue the broadcast from Grover's Mill. Evidently, there's some difficulty with our field transmission.
By now, Americans were highly attuned to the sound of crisis.
You have the stock market crash, followed by mass unemployment, followed by bank failures by the hundreds.
In the recent years, much of what had drifted through the ether and into their living rooms had been bad news.
The worst storm in years along the eastern seaboard has taken a death toll of more than 200 lives. Untold damages.
Stories so unprecedented and unsettling, they were nearly impossible to believe. And yet, they were true.
The sympathy of the world was out to Colonel Lindbergh and his devoted wife in their extreme anguish. at the kidnapping of their baby son, Charles Augustus Lindbergh, Jr.
Disaster after disaster. And then that terrible accident, May 1937, when the German passenger airship, the Hindenburg, was consumed by a fire in New Jersey.
Oh, it's crashing to the ground! Oh, the humanity!
And all the while in the background had been the steady, ominous drumbeat of war.
We are Americans, and we want to believe we're going to be exempt from the tragic conflicts that are enveloping Europe. But we also sense the likelihood that we'll be swept up in them as well.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have a grave announcement to make. Incredible as it may seem, both the observations of science and our own eyes lead to the inescapable assumption that these strange beings who landed in the Jersey farmlands tonight are the vanguard of an invading army from the planet Mars.
My neighbor came to the door excitedly.
Come quickly, there's something on the radio you just gotta hear.
What's it about?
Marsman!
That was her reply. Mars man. I was skeptical at first, but then I thought about it. Hasn't science proved that there's life on Mars through their observations?
Ladies and gentlemen, I've just been informed that we've finally established communication with an eyewitness of the tragedy. Professor Pearson has been located at a farmhouse near Grover's Mill.
Of the creatures in the rocket cylinder at Grover's Mill, I can give no observation as to their origin, their purpose, or their being here on Earth. For want of a better term, I shall refer to these mysterious weapons as a heat ray. It is all too evident that these beings have scientific knowledge far in advance of our own.
Soon, strange bulletins began coming in over the press service wires.
In Bergenfield, New Jersey, nearly 20 families turned up at the police station with all their household possessions piled up into their cars.
In Indianapolis, a woman rushed the pulpit of a Methodist church, shouting out that the end of the world had come.
And in Washington State, a spectacularly ill-timed power failure sent the small town of Concrete into darkness, and the terrified residents fleeing to the mountains.
We think that we're really smart, but if there's a cue out there that could possibly be dangerous, we're going to react to it protectively, instinctively. Fear first, and reason and fact second.
And to stress people back in those days by the depression and talk of war and so forth is already pre-wired to be sensitive to danger signals. Those drums are already beating.
I'm speaking to you from the roof of the broadcasting building, New York City. People to evacuate the city as the Martians approach. All communication with Jersey Shore was closed 10 minutes ago. No more defenses. Our army wiped out, artillery, Air Force, everything wiped out. This may be our last broadcast. We'll stay with you till the end. Enemy now in sight! Five gray machines! The first one is crossing the river. I can see it from here, wading the Hudson like a man wading through the brook. The first machine has reached the shore. People in the streets can see it now. They're running towards the East River, thousands of them, falling in like rats. Now the smoke's reached Times Square. People trying to run from it, but it's no use. They're falling like flies. Now the smoke's reaching closer. 6th Avenue, 5th Avenue, 100 yards away, it's 50 feet.
This is Orson Welles, everybody, out of character, to assure you that the War of the Worlds has no further significance than the holiday offering it was intended to be. The Mercury Theater's own radio version of dressing up in a sheet, jumping out of a bush, and saying, boo.
After the panic broadcast, millions of Americans sent letters to the FCC, to CBS, and to Wells himself, offering feedback on the program.
Let me congratulate you on your great broadcast.
Thanks again for a while of a
A
thrill.
horrible prank to play on innocent, unsuspecting people. I think the best place for you to go is Mars. Take a rocket and get going.
So goodbye, everybody. And remember, for the next day or so, the terrible lesson you've all learned today. That grinning, glowing, globular invader of your living room is an inhabitant of the pumpkin patch. And if your doorbell rings and nobody's there, that was no Martian. It's Halloween.